there, I'm Keith Merrow.
Leon Del Muerte.
Welcome to my studio, where we do all sorts of heavy metal activities such as audio recording and production. I've personally been a PreSonus Studio One Pro user since the beta release of the software back in, I believe it was 2008 or 2009. I've been through every iteration of the software. Every piece of music that I've ever produced and released on the internet has been produced in Studio One Pro. I've got to grow alongside it, and I sort of know the ins and outs that work really well for my workflow for producing metal. PreSonus invited Leon and I to the NAMM show to do a presentation, like a full-blown demonstration of Studio One in a metal setting. Today, I'm going to take you to Anaheim, California to the NAMM show. Let's get on the road. We're running late.
Flying.
So here we are, Anaheim, California. Now there's this f***ing guy.
Oh, fuck.
NAMM, what's up? Day 3, how we doing today? All right, welcome to the PreSonus booth. We have a very special presentation for you right now with the one and only Keith Merrow.
So the session that we put together for this is basically demonstrating all the features that you're going to find in Studio One. It's real low latency, can operate on a laptop really efficiently, and it's shareable. We wanted to make it something that we could share with you guys. You could download your demo of Studio One, or if you have Studio One Pro Plus, you could download this and have a nice little template for producing metal right out of the box. You can record straight into it and have a mix that sounds like the song from the beginning of the video. With any recording session in the metal variety, your mix is really going to focus around the drums. That's your starting point.
I think that the foundation of most metal recordings is going to be with the drums. Studio One comes with Impact, which was one of the few plugins in Studio One's library that I'm not that familiar with.
Right. I've had a little bit of time with Impact now. I put together a drum kit for Impact. My last EP, Mojave Repressions, I sampled the drums from that album, and I put together this multi-velocity drum pack for Impact to be used in this session. You should be able to get in there and program right away. It uses Superior drummer mapping, so if you have programmed drums in Superior or other MIDI packs from that software, you can use it with this as well.
All the samples are already processed and they've already been recorded professionally, so they sound pretty good right out of the box.
There's not a whole lot that needed to be done with the drums since they're already processed. We really just kind of ran some parallel compression. We have a reverb bus to sort of give the drums more of an atmosphere. Should give you a good head start on getting some pretty good sounding drums right away. And so when you download this session, it includes the samples, and it should load everything into Impact for you already. You can load in your own samples. This is just to get you started. I wanted to kind of keep the drum processing pretty simple so people can just get in there and program and have it sound like drums.
And have it still be pretty lightweight. The only overhead here is basically the compressor and the reverb.
And that's what we got for the drums.
The bass at the beginning of the song is actually automated to have chorus and modulation in there, so that when it kicks in, the bass tone actually changes and it turns on a fat pedal. The settings, I think, are pretty normal for bass guitar in the death metal setting.
Distortion.
Lots of distortion, lots of gain.
Lots of sub.
Waveforms can be so jumpy. In your session here, use the compressor on the way into the amp to kind of tame it, and a compressor in the loop to sort of keep it from spiking out.
You don't want huge peaks and valleys because that's where you get those weird bass dropouts, and there's something about that in a mix that can instantly make it sound low quality.
Well, it sounds super amateur.
We have this compressed to all hell, and it's basically got 2 compressors on it, one in the front and one in the back, and that's keeping it nice and even, nice and thick and fat, big old sausage. And that sounds like this.
The most important part, obviously, is the guitars.
We used Ampire again. This is all stock Studio One stuff. Comes with Studio One Pro Plus. We ended up using the Metal Machine amp, which I believe is like their 5150, 6505 flavored thing. British flavored cabinet, tube screamer in front of the amp, 10 band in the loop.
Pretty impressed with the Empire, actually.
They have like a diesel.
Yeah,
they have
5150.
They have this, so there's a couple other amps in there, and I think they sound significantly better than just like the Empire that comes with the artist version.
Yeah,
it's great for pre-production. It's great for editing DIs. You could drop your DIs straight into these tracks right here, and your guitars will sound like this. Anything that you want to automate, like if you want to have a switch on a pedal turn on or off, all you have to do is right click on it and you draw it in.
How did you process the guitar bus?
I try to get the best sound I can get going into the bus, so I don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff on the bus.
Sure.
What I typically like to do here is I use like an EQ and a compressor, real light compression, just enough to just kind of tame those peaks and squash out those valleys just a little tiny bit. I don't like a ton of compression on my guitars, but just a tiny bit.
Just a touch.
For the EQ, I'm just mainly shaping the low end a little bit. I like to use the Pultec trick, this passive EQ that comes with the FET channel. You can boost and attenuate the 60 hertz frequency at the same time and really kind of shape that low end. You get some pretty cool results for both guitar and bass if you use a passive style EQ like that. I'm boosting a little bit of 60 hertz and I'm boosting some 3K. Everything else is Empire pulling all the heavy weight. So the center guitar, usually for a center track, I like to add a little bit more mid-range so that it kind of stands above the other frequency ranges of the guitars. It's got some delay and reverb on it. We use it for the intro and the chorus sections, and it sounds like this.
For your rhythm guitars, do you always like to use the same tone for both guitars?
You can get a really cool stereo spread with 2 separate tones. I typically use the same tone on both sides because the way I play and the way that I write, I want it to sound like one guitar
You
being
want it to
played.
mesh together a little better.
Yeah, I want it to sound like one performance in stereo.
Sure.
Rather than 2
interesting.
separard performances. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For certain parts, like big choruses or stuff like that,
Yeah,
you know,
we'll
where
swap it up a little bit.
I'll swap it up.
Yeah,
I'll quad track and add a different tone on top of that and blend those two.
Always pan them hard left and right like in this session?
I do. For the left and right guitars, I always pan those hard left and right. If there's going to be some filler guitars or something, or maybe, another layer, I might do like 80% left and right,
Sure.
or 50% left and
Sure,
right
bring
on
the
those.
image
Bring
in a
them
little
in
bit.
just a little bit.
Sure. In terms of guitar production, this is a pretty standard setup in this session.
Yes, absolutely. The way this is engineered is pretty standard stuff.
So death metal vocals are actually not that difficult to record. One big thing you got to watch out for is the sibilance. So a de-esser is pretty much necessary all the time. Low voices, high voices.
If you want to kill that snake noise, you got to use a de-esser on there and get rid of that snake.
It's a So yeah, all that, it can be kind of hard to hear if you don't know what you're looking for. This will give you a good starting point to figure out what is being cut from the vocals if you turn the de-esser on and off. Every voice is different, but for my voice, it sounds like, maybe a little bit of a mid boost helps kind of bring out the chest tones. Beyond that, just compression and limiting just to flatten it all out. I think you did some automation on some of it just to throw some of the words, particular words at like the end of lines, into a reverb automation lane. So you could kind of get that epic, verby.
The reverb throws where they kind of carry.
Yeah.
In this session, same kind of thing. You could drop your vocal tracks in there and you could just draw on the automation lane and get those reverb throws. It's already set up to do that. Basically, it's the dampening. During certain parts, it'll open that dampening up so it gets a little louder, brighter, a little more carry.
Your eyes balls, your gun expels, gaseous noxious fumes, your wallet implodes.
That's pretty much all of the elements of this particular mix. We have our drums, we have our bass, guitars, center guitar, and vocals. The important thing to note here is that we're doing top-down mixing in this session.
So top-down mixing is when you mix into an existing master chain, so you're sort of hearing a finished product as you're working on it.
Because if you weren't top-down mixing, you would typically have a fairly flat-sounding mix, maybe not a whole lot of coloring. If you change something on the master bus, it's going to globally change everything. I like to use like some kind of saturation or some sort of distortion on my mix.
Yeah.
And in this case, we ended up using Red Light District, which is kind of the stock tube driver that comes with Studio One. Sort of an unexpected plugin to be used for that, but it works really good for that.
It works fine for it, yeah.
And what that's doing is it's sort of taming some of those peaks that you get, sort of flattens it out a little bit, and it just gives the whole thing a little bit more energy and a little bit more power.
And so on this bus, you have the distortion first. What are you doing with the multiband compressor in this?
The multi-band compressor is kind of taming the sub-frequencies so that they're not eating up your master, eating up your headroom too much. You got to really kind of contain those in a metal mix. You're basically trying to control chaos. A multi-band compressor gives you the option to select certain areas of the frequency range to compress
over the whole mix,
to compress or expand or excite. My philosophy for a multi-band compression is to basically just solo out each one of those channels, mold it until it sounds pleasing to me on its own.
Sure.
And then I introduce the next channel.
Oh, okay.
And the reason you want to do that is so you can get a louder mix, which is going to end up pushing it into your limiter a little harder.
Yeah.
Without that limiter actually having to do a whole bunch of work.
So after the multi-band compressor, what do you have? You have an EQ there?
Yeah, I have the VT1 EQ, which also comes with Pro Plus. That's just basically the final salt and pepper over the entire mix. That's just a taste, and of course that's a totally subjective thing. The art of mixing and mastering comes into play where you identify how you want it to sound. And then it's a limiter.
And that's just keeping you from going over 0 decibel?
That's just keeping me from going over 0. It doesn't have any chance of clipping. Have it hover around like -6. If it goes any higher than that, you really start to hear that limiter. Some of the other elements of this session that are pretty cool. If you look here on the top of the session here, we have marker tracks. Put a marker at every change in the song so that I can quickly navigate between sections.
And you could also conceivably grab these sections in the arranger track and actually move them around.
Yeah, the arranger track's cool because basically everything below these blocks, it's going to move when you move this block. So if you want to rearrange a song, you have A, B, A, C, D, and you want it to be A, B, B, C, D, you can just take those parts and duplicate them and move them around, and anything under that block, it's going to move with it. So your guitars, bass, drums, everything. And it's a lot easier than just selecting a range, copying it,
and cutting it
and pasting it. You just have this block that you can move around. So the arranger track is a really useful tool.
There's also the scratch pad, which I don't use nearly as much as you do.
The scratch pad is an independent timeline from your main timeline in the session. And you can have an infinite number of those. I don't even work on the main timeline. I'll do an entire record. Each scratch pad will be its own song.
Gotcha.
And you can have an independent tempo.
Sure.
You can even have different mixes for each of those scratch pads if you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
But the benefit of that is you can have one mix that affects each one of those scratch pads. So you have a congruent mix across your entire record.
Sure.
By doing all the songs in one session. And if you're working on a song You're writing some riffs, and next thing you know, you came up with a riff that doesn't work with what you're working on.
You could just jot it down,
Jot it down on a scratch pad.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what I use it for sure.
I have a session that's literally just scratch pads full of riffs. Another cool thing that I just started using, because it's a fairly new feature, is the lyrics display.
Yeah, I've never used this until this session.
I think that's a pretty cool and convenient place to sort of store your lyrics for a song anyway. I mean, why not put them in the session where the song exists? So the last feature here in this session, that's one that's fairly uncommon. I don't think people really use, and my use case for it is very specific. I like to actually mime myself playing the song and drop it in a video track, so that at any given moment, if I need to relearn a part,
it's a good idea.
Remember it a year later when I open the session, I have a video track in there of me actually playing the riffs, and it makes it a lot easier for me to relearn it. I just recorded it with my phone and imported it, and that's it. So this session is going to be hosted on my website, keithmerrow.com. I'll put a link in the video description. Love to hear someone work with this and create a mix, or even make their own mix with the audio that we've already provided and send it to us.
Yeah, this is a great template if you're just starting to use Studio One, and like some of the features are maybe a little beyond your current skill set too. You know, automation, using Empire, all the plugins that it comes with.
This is already set up in a way that you can basically get right in there. So I'd like to thank Personas for inviting us out to the NAMM show, and we had a great time. It was a crazy show this year. We got to see a lot of old friends and made some new friends, and it was just an overall good time. So thanks to Personas. One of the things I'd like to do for 2025 is do a little bit more production focused.
Sure.
Because people ask me a lot of questions about this stuff all the time.
Very specific questions.
All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll see you on the next video, and have fun. Best luck to you. Metal dreams. That was the dumbest thing I've ever said in my life.